This is the Autel EVO Lite Plus. It's a 6K drone that rivals some of DJI drones, and I've been flying with it for the past couple weeks, and I've found some things I really like about this drone, and some things that are a little bit funky. So in this video, we're gonna go through 10 pros and 10 cons about this drone, and throughout this video, I'm gonna show you a ton of video that I've shot with this drone, so that you can see if this is a solid drone to get. So where this drone fits in is somewhere between the DJI Air2S and the DJI Mavic 3, because it's got features of both and it's somewhere in the middle. And so I want to show you all the capabilities of this drone. I want to show you some footage from this drone and also show you some places where this drone could improve. But when you look at the big picture, this is a solid drone, and you might actually want to get the Autel EVO Lite Plus over something like the Air2S, depending on your needs. All right, so let's just get right into it. And the first thing that really stands out with this drone is the flight time. So I've flown a bunch of batteries in a bunch of different situations, and overall, the flight time of this drone feels so much longer than every other drone that I've flown. Even the DJI Mavic 3, which that drone feels like it hangs up in the air for a long time. This one feels like it's up in the air even longer. And so for a comparison, I flew a full battery on this drone in somewhat windy conditions, and I got about 34 minutes out of the battery with 15% left. Now, in similar conditions, when I flew the Mavic 3, I got 28 minutes with 10% left on the battery. And the Air2S, I got 20 minutes with 10% left on the battery. So overall, this drone is getting more out of each flight, which means that you can do more with each flight. They say on the website that you get 40 minutes of flight time, and it's much more accurate than DJI Mavic 3 saying you're getting 40 something minutes of flight time. But let's talk about something that is a little bit funky with this drone, and that is the design. So it does look like a Mavic drone. It's about the same size as the Mavic drone. However, there's a few things that they just seem to have missed on. So for one, when you fold it up, the legs kind of stick out. And for me, this is important because when I stick it in and out of my bag, well, the DJI drones are pretty solid because they're very clean when you put them in a backpack. Whereas this drone, I've noticed that it kind of catches on different things in my backpack because the legs stick out a little bit. So it's not as clean design when the drone's folded down. Now, also one of the big things that's frustrating is the controller. There's nowhere to put the sticks. And when you have the cable plugged in, well, you can't really close the top bracket. And overall, the just design of the controller is bigger and bulkier. So when you're putting it in a backpack, it's not as portable. DJI drones, it's all integrated into the controller nicely. And also that controller folds down into a smaller package. So the design of this drone is almost there. A few minor things, and this drone would be right in line with the Mavic drones. Now there's two versions of the Autel EVO Lite. This is the Plus. Now the Plus has 6K resolution, which gives you more flexibility when you're editing to do things like crop in and move your frame around. So whether you just want to punch in on a section of the frame and crop something out, or you want to do something like stabilization, you just have more ability with that 6K, and overall the image looks super sharp. Now, one thing that's really frustrating about this drone is that there is no log profile. There's no way to preserve your highlights and your shadows when you're out filming. You're basically getting a baked-in image every time. Overall, I prefer to have the ability to shoot in a log profile when I'm shooting in some of these settings where it's super contrasty. So I have the sun in the background and I'm driving my black Jeep through the landscape. Well, I want more flexibility to be able to color grade that in post rather than having a burnt in image. When you have this strong contrast, it's a little bit harder to be able to color grade that later, whereas if you have a log profile, you typically will get some more dynamic range out of that shot, and you'll be able to make something look much better. Now, unfortunately, this camera is only an 8-bit camera. It's not a 10-bit camera, and that's probably one of the reasons why you don't have access to a log profile. Because if you have an 8-bit camera and you're doing heavy color grading, well, the sky's gonna break apart. You're gonna get some crazy color banding. You're just not gonna get a good image. Whereas if you use a burnt-in standard look, then the footage is gonna look much better. So I understand why they might pull the log out of this drone, But it is something that is unfortunate, and if you are someone who's used to doing color grading and having more control over your image, well, you can't really do that with this drone. You basically get one color profile, but overall it's just that standard look with lots of contrast and lots of saturation. Now I'm just gonna pause the video right here. I don't have a sponsor in this video, but I do wanna tell you about a course that I have over on Skillshare. It's a 2-hour in-depth editing course that goes through basically everything that I do when I approach my YouTube videos and also all of my adventure films. And also over on Skillshare, I have an in-depth course on color grading. So if you wanna learn more about editing or color grading, I'll include a link down below in the description to where you can get 30 days for free on Skillshare, and you can take one, if not both, of these courses. All right, let's go back into some drone stuff. The third thing that I really like about this drone is that it's a 1-inch sensor. So the Autel EVO Lite Plus has a bigger sensor, which gives you more low light capabilities. So if you're shooting closer to sunrise, sunset, or even if you're shooting at night, they have a night mode, and you're able to get some pretty awesome looking footage. I personally don't shoot a ton at night, so for me, having that night mode, I could take it or leave it, but overall the image with the 1-inch sensor does look really good. Now also with this 1-inch sensor, you have an aperture, at least on the Plus version. So on the Plus version, you get an f2.8 to an f11. So overall, it compares to the Air2S with the 1-inch sensor. However, you get the added benefit of having the aperture like you would get on a Mavic 3. Now, unfortunately, this drone was released without all the features available. So one of the things that you don't have access to is active track. And for me, that's a big thing that I like to use because I go out and film by myself a lot of times, and I want to be able to get those shots of me interacting with a landscape, and active track really helps getting those shots. So it feels like an incomplete drone because I know that there are capabilities in this drone to be able to do things like tracking, but I don't have access to them. Now, one thing that's interesting is there is this mode called portrait mode. In this mode, I found that you can use it as tracking. Now, what portrait mode is supposed to do is focus on your subject and blur the background. But what I've found is that you can put it into portrait mode and it works as a tracking. So it will lock on to you. You can move, and it works like the spotlight mode in a DJI drone. And that's where basically it locks onto the subject and you can move the drone in any direction and it keeps that subject centered. So I can only envision that this drone will come with some decent tracking when it's available, but you know, we're waiting on that. Now, because of the 6K sensor, this drone has a 3x lossless zoom, and you can do the zooming in camera. So if you wanted to shoot at a 2x zoom, you can do that while you're flying. Or if you're shooting at 6K resolution, you can punch in later in post, and you're not gonna lose as much data when you punch in and you're using it on a 4K timeline. Now, one thing that's kind of frustrating for me is that the controller doesn't charge your phone. It may seem like a minor thing, but after using a DJI controller where you can charge your phone while you're flying, having that function taken away is actually pretty noticeable, because there's been a few times when I'm out flying and my phone battery was pretty low. And I pop it in and I start flying and my phone drains super fast, and then all of a sudden I can't fly anymore because my phone is dead. Now, one feature that I really like with the Autel EVO Lite is the Hyperlapse. It's really easy to use. So when you go into the hyperlapse mode, you can just set how long you want your hyperlapse, how many seconds in between each shot, and you can set the max speed that you want your drone to fly at. Now you just push in a direction on the controller that you want the drone to fly, and then click the function button on the controller, and it's gonna lock that speed and that direction, and it's just gonna fly and get your hyperlapse. So this is like a super easy way to get hyperlapses really quick. And I found myself actually using this when I'm out flying, especially when you pair it with the long battery life. Now with this lens, it's not as wide as other competitors. So this lens is about a 29mm equivalent, which isn't as wide as I would hope for with a drone. I typically like shooting on something that's a 24 or wider. So the Mavic 3 is around a 24mm and the Air2S is around a 22mm. Now all the footage I've been getting out of this drone just looks super good. And a lot of the time I've been flying with just automatic. I haven't really been putting it into the manual settings, which I'll talk about in a little bit, because the drone seems to calculate the exposure really well. I found that this is a drone that I could just put up in the sky, and as long as what I'm filming is staying consistent in terms of lighting, it has a good looking image. And even when it's super contrasty with a super dark foreground and a super bright sky, it seems to find a good balance, and the foreground actually looks really good without the sky being super overexposed. Now, when you are switching between modes like photo and Quickshots and video and then pro mode and then hyperlapse, it's got a dial that's similar to something you might find on like an iPhone. And I really don't like this experience when I'm out flying because it's just kind of clunky trying to get from mode to mode. I wish it was a little bit cleaner and something where I could jump around modes easier, because Quickshots is like at the top, pro mode's at the bottom, photos is somewhere in the middle, kind of towards the top. So I'm constantly like going up and down, and it just takes a little bit longer to switch from modes. Now, this drone apparently has a 7-mile distance. I haven't tested 7 miles because when you fly 7 miles away, you're way out of line of sight. You can't really see that far, especially with a little drone that's way out in the distance. But because of that capability of being able to have a super strong connection, I found that the drone just never loses signal with the controller. So when I'm out flying, it's just reliable. I can see a clean shot. I don't really get much stuttering, and overall the experience has been pretty good. However, with this image transmission, what you see on the screen is not necessarily what you're getting. I found that a lot of times when I'm out flying in these heavy contrasted situations, the foreground looks super dark. So if I'm trying to fly manual settings, I'll try to adjust, but when I bring the footage into my computer, it actually is a different exposure. So what I've found is that the screen is not true to what I'm actually filming. It's not a perfect kind of one-to-one. On the DJI drones, I found that the screen is much more accurate to what I'm actually recording. And so that leads into something that's good, but also a little bit frustrating, I've found, and that is pro mode. So you have just standard video mode, which does all the exposure and everything for you. And then you have pro mode, which you can do shutter lock, aperture lock, you can do full manual, and it gives you the complete control over your image. However, because the image seems more contrasty, I found that when I'm trying to do manual, I just have to get used to knowing what the drone is producing versus what I'm seeing on the screen and make a little bit of adjustments based on that. This gets into the next thing that's frustrating, and that is there's no histogram. So the only control that you have to see your exposure is an overexposure warning. So it puts zebras on elements of your image that are overexposed. Now, that's great, but I would also like to have a histogram so I can at least see where my exposures are on a graph, especially because I'd be able to see what I'm actually getting on a graph versus just trying to eyeball it on the screen. Now, one thing that's great about this drone is that you have quick shots. You have 4 of them. So you have what's called flick, you have rocket, you have fadeaway, and you have orbit. Now, it's only 4 options, but these are good options to use when you're out flying. But one thing that I found is kind of frustrating is that there's not a whole lot of options when it comes to these 4 different quick shots. So if you're doing the orbit, you either go left or right. You can't choose how fast. So if you want a slow orbit, well, you're gonna have to do it manually because it only has 1 speed. And the same with the rocket or the flick or the fadeaway. It's a set distance and it's a set speed, so you can't control any of that. The quick shots on a DJI drone, you have a lot more creative control to make the quick shot exactly what you want. And the last thing about this drone is that the way that it's positioned and priced is interesting because it's definitely more expensive than the Air2S. So the Air2S premium bundle, which is what you'd want to get with extra batteries and everything, is $12.99. Now the Autel EVO Lite Plus with the premium bundle, which gives you extra batteries and D-filters, basically everything you need, it's $18.49. Now the Mavic 3, if you want to get the Fly More combo, you're looking at $3,000. So is this a good drone to get, and should you consider it over a DJI product? Well, it depends on what you need. If you want 10-bit and if you want log, well, the Autel EVO Lite Plus doesn't have those features. But if you want the super long flight time, well, the Autel EVO Lite is a much better option. So it really comes down to your price range and what you need out of your drone. And next, you really need to check out this video right here. It goes through 10 different drone moves that you can use when you're out filming by yourself.